So it's been 3 weeks since my last video, and I usually would make a devlog where I show off what I've been working on. Well, there's just one tiny little problem. I have been working on this stupid f***ing menu for the last 3 weeks. So because of this, I don't really have anything to show off for a devlog type of video, but as I was pulling my hair out trying to put together something simple as a main menu, I realized that making games is hard. Now, anyone watching the video is probably thinking, well, obviously. And don't get me wrong, when I was going into this game dev thing, I did expect to run into some difficult problems along the way, but spending 3 weeks on a simple menu was not really on my game dev bingo card. So for this video, I thought I'll share some insights on the difficult things you might encounter while making games. Now, if this is your first time coming across my channel, hello, I'm devlog, and I'm currently working on my first game, Byte the Dust, which is a simple pixel platformer inspired by games like Jump King and Getting Over It, where making one mistake will set you back a little, or in the worst case, all the way back to the beginning. I've been working on this game since last summer, so just to let you know, the things I will be sharing in this video are coming from the perspective of a beginner game dev. Now with that out of the way, let's get into it, shall we? So this whole game dev journey for me so far has just been overcoming obstacles, only to get hit in the face by 5 new ones you have to overcome. Like for example the menu I've been struggling with for the past few weeks. Now maybe I'm just an idiot and I'm making things way more complicated than it needs to be, but my main issue with the UI has been scaling it properly across different screen sizes. This wasn't something I had even considered would become an issue until I sent my game to a friend for playtesting. And he had an ultra-wide monitor, so when he opened the game on his computer, the buttons and layout were all messed up. And he could also see more stuff on his screen, which would break the game since the camera is supposed to move when the player goes out of bounds. To combat this, I had to force the game into using a 16:9 aspect ratio, which will add black bars to the sides or the top of the user's display if the user is not using a 16:9 screen. Now, this helped a little, but it also introduced issues where the UI elements would act weird for some reason. Buttons would be okay looking in the editor, but once building the game, the buttons would increase in size and the animations for them would go on to live their own lives. Now, a sane person would just figure out how to make it so that they don't do that. I, however, like the moron that I am, decided that the reasonable thing to do would be to tweak each and every value of every game object that had anything to do with the UI so that it would line up perfectly. Which obviously has cost me a lot of time and sanity. Hopefully anyone listening to this is smarter than me and doesn't make things more complicated than it needs to be. Another issue you might come across is the lack of experience in the different skills that you will need to have to be able to create the games you want. If you're creating a game by yourself, you will need to wear a lot of different hats and learn how to do things like programming, creating art assets, and composing music. These are essential skills for game development, and these can be hard to learn depending on your background. For example, I have a background in computer science, so I already had some programming experience when starting out. However, making art and especially making music has been a nightmare for me. It just takes me such a long time to make something, and more often than not, it just turns out okay and not excellent. And for you it might be the other way around, where you have a lot of experience with making music and art, but not so much in programming experience. So it's highly likely that you will have to spend quite some time learning new things. Not saying it's a bad thing, of course, and learning new things can be fun, but it will also be difficult to get the hang of new things you haven't tried before. But the worst thing is that as you improve, you'll get the urge to go back and redo the things you've already made, because you feel like you can make it way better now. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do that from time to time, but it is an evil, vicious cycle that will eat up a lot of your time. So while I get that you want to make your game look as beautiful as it possibly can, you need to consider that it will affect the development time quite tremendously, so choose your battles wisely. Now, if you're anything like me, you most likely get unmotivated from time to time. When I first started working on the game, I was really excited, so it wasn't really that hard to sit down and work on the project. But as time went on, I kinda got tired of it after a while, so there's definitely a honeymoon period in the beginning, because you're excited to create something cool. The key to finishing a project is to keep on going even though you're not that excited anymore, because you don't want to start on a bunch of projects and never finish them. From my experience, the motivation kind of comes in waves. Like some weeks I'm really pumped and get a lot of work done, and others I barely do anything at all. On the days that I'm not really feeling myself, I try to do something, even if it's just something really simple that takes 5 minutes, because taking small steps eventually builds up and you will see yourself gone quite the distance. But remember, it's also okay to take breaks. You don't want to burn yourself out either. Here's a quick tip that might help you if you struggle with procrastination. Just try to sit down for 5 minutes and start working, because once you start, it's easier to continue. You might get into that working state, which will help you a lot, because sometimes just starting out is harder than doing the actual work. But if you can get over that mental barrier, there's a high chance that you will lock in and get shit done. Now, the last thing I will talk about in this video will only apply to you depending on what kind of game you're making. So a big part of what makes game development hard is not necessarily just because the work itself is hard to do, but because there is so much work that needs to be done, which can get a bit overwhelming, and the type of game you make can actually determine how much work you actually have to put in. So my game is linear in the sense that I need to keep on making new sections for the game. If I were to give anyone listening a tip for what to make for the first game, it would be to create something that isn't linear. Because you need to put in a lot more effort to create content for the game. Like, I could spend a day working on the level layout, and that would create about 1 to 2 minutes of content for the player. Whereas if you're creating a non-linear game, where you play in like an arena or like a limited space area, then you can simply just add an item or a power-up, and then the player will have like 15 to 30 more minutes of content to play with. But you should make the game that you want to make. But I'm telling you right now that creating a linear game will increase the amount of time it takes to finish the project drastically, and things can get a bit repetitive, so it's worth taking into consideration when deciding on what kind of game you want to make for your first one. Now, even though game development can be a bit difficult at times, it is still a lot of fun, so I hope this video hasn't turned anyone off from the idea of trying it out, as it is just me sharing a little insight of how game development has been for me so far. If you want to hear more about my experience working on my game so far, then you should check out this video on the first 6 months of my game dev journey. Give the video a like if you like the content, and thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.